Education and technology. Welcome back to Techstination. I'm Fred Fishkin. The technology advisory and investment firm GP Bullhound is out with an education technology report. And joining us is VP Jason Nordlicht. Hi, Jason.
Hey, Fred. How are you today?
Terrific. Well, let's talk first about a little background. Tell us about GP Bullhound.
So GP Bullhound is a global investment bank that helps its clients raise capital. We usually do it through 4 different avenues. So that would be sell side M&A, buy side M&A, research and events. Then we also have capital transactions. One avenue that is of particular interest to us is education, and more specifically, education technology. So what we did was we went ahead and put together a report of the 7 most kind of prominent trends that we have been tracking across the education technology space. We think each of these 7 trends are really kind of poised for outsized growth within the educational ecosystem. And when I say the educational ecosystem, that really kind of spans early childhood education to K-12, higher education, post-secondary, and then corporate and professional learning. So basically, these trends that we've identified really span the entirety of that education ecosystem, and we really kind of see a lot of growth opportunity.
I imagine the pandemic had a significant impact on technology and education.
Absolutely. So we saw a really big uptick in remote and asynchronous learning modalities coming out of COVID. And I think that's really kind of had a really large impact on adoption of education technology and a lot of the tools and applications that work best online or in remote or asynchronous modalities. And we're seeing a huge uptick and I think COVID really shone a light on a lot of the benefits and the demonstrable efficacy that you're going to see, across a lot of these trends.
One of the areas that you looked at was game-based learning. Tell us about that.
So game-based learning is something that we've seen really kind of pick up in recent times. It's usually coupled with gamification. So I'd say that the key difference is that gamification is really kind of gamifying or making game-like elements of things that are not inherently game-like, and then game-based learning is really just using the games for learning, applications. We've seen that student engagement and learning outcomes are very positively impacted by gamification and game-based learning. We're also seeing tremendous growth in the space. So if you look at game-based learning, back in 21, we're seeing the spend around $7 billion. It's expected to grow about 23% plus to over 15, by 2025, which is just a tremendous amount of growth. We think that this will be coupled with some growth in AR and VR as well, because the applications are really endless when you kind of combine the two. But gamification and game-based learning has really seen an uptick, I think, because there's so much interest in the US and abroad on gaming. I think that, inherently, if you kind of look at, gamification and game-based learning, people are super interested in, gaming, and it kind of creates higher engagement. And I think coming out of the pandemic, that's only kind of grown, and we're going to continue to see it grow over time.
Are we talking about things like Roblox, or what are we talking about?
For sure. So, I mean, that could definitely be incorporated in it. When I think of kind of game-based learning, there's, you could even consider Kahoot, quizzes. I mean, there's just a number of different, companies out there that kind of play in this space. We interviewed a really interesting one called Classcraft. We spoke with the CEO, Sean Young, who gave us his kind of take on, where the gamification and kind of game-based learning markets are headed. And, really, really interesting read there.
I guess it's getting kids where they like to be, right? And
exactly, that's exactly right. So, and not just that. I mean, we're seeing teachers really also enjoy kind of the benefits of game-based learning as well, both in and outside the classroom.
Tell me about AR and VR, virtual reality, augmented reality, what we're seeing now, and where you think it's going.
So right now, what we're seeing is kind of a high growth stage for AR, VR. Where it's going, I think, the opportunities are really endless with spending on education technology almost tripling over the next, call it, 5+ years. I think that there's going to be a lot of innovation within the AR, VR space that makes it more affordable for the average consumer. So when you start thinking about kind of students and how they intake their information, I think there's going to be quite a shift over the next few years here as AR, VR applications continue to refine, continue to innovate, and continue to become a little bit more affordable. Like a really good kind of example of what I mean by that would be if you look at a headset for an AR, VR headset. So K-12 schools might not have the budget or might not have kind of the desire to kind of spend on these AR, VR headsets, which could be fairly expensive. But with the increase in spending and focus on things like AR, VR in ed tech, we expect that to kind of alleviate some consumer concerns about the products in the near term. So all of this spending on ed tech and technologies like AR, VR, building out that efficacy and kind of the learning, the improvements to learning outcomes, I think it's all going to really kind of culminate in, a really big kind of growth phase for AR, VR, and gamification and game-based learning. And I think
are there companies specifically looking at building headsets that are really suitable for classrooms?
Definitely. So, another really good interview, we spoke with Z-Space, who's really big within the AR, VR space and also within K-12. And they have some really interesting thoughts there. I think that, there's just an unbelievable opportunity to integrate AR, VR, and game-based learning inside the classroom. And I think it's going to start taking place over the next couple of years here.
The pandemic highlighted some of the issues around equity, making sure this technology is available to all. Seems like there still is a lot of work to be done, and maybe that's even going to be magnified if we start talking about things like AR and VR. What are your thoughts?
So yeah, I think educational equity is something that's going to become increasingly important. I think that it's something that people will continue to need to focus on over time. Just like if you look at cybersecurity, a lot of remote and online learning is made, it's kind of led to a boost in cyber attacks as well. So if you kind of look at, AR, VR and gamification, I think, educational equity is something that people are going to start focusing on a bit more, just like, as we continue to build out things like asynchronous and remote learning, people are going to focus more on things like cybersecurity. So all of the benefits and the demonstrable efficacy we get to enjoy from a lot of these pieces of technology that improve learning outcomes, they're also going to make us kind of need to focus on things like educational equity, to make sure that things are kind of they're equitable for all learning communities moving forward.
Kids, no matter what their economic circumstances, have access to the technology on an equal basis. Really important.
Exactly.
Is there any place that people can go to get more information about the work you're doing here?
Definitely. I would advise anybody who has any questions to come take a look at the GP Bullhound website, review our report, download the report, and feel free to reach out to me directly. That's jason.nordlicht@gpbullhound.com.
Jason, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thanks, Fred.